What's up everyone, welcome back. So today we're going to talk about 8 tips that you should know before you start your cutting phase. So let's get into the video. Okay, so tip number 1 is more of a question. It's more so, are you even ready for a fat loss phase? And what I mean by that is that you're actually going into a deficit right away, or you're creating a deficit. And what a deficit really is an additional stress to your body. So if you're already stressed out and your sleep is off and like your diet is just completely off, you might want to stay at maintenance calories for a couple of weeks just to fix your stress levels and really manage the stress and your sleep levels and really manage that sleep, because it's gonna help you have a better cut overall and really cut that fat that you want, and it makes the whole prep a lot easier because you really want to preserve that muscle. So the higher the cortisol level, the higher the stress is, the more the body's gonna hold on to that fat. So really go and assess your stress and sleep levels and see where you're at, and really try to fix that first, and then you should hop into the fat loss phase. Tip number 2. So after you figured out your maintenance levels of calories that you need to maintain your weight, what you want to do is you want to have a 200 to a 500 calorie deficit, be it from the diet or be it from just adding additional cardio to the mix just to create that deficit. And just make sure it's within that range right off the bat and not anything more than 500, because everything we're doing is muscle preservation. So right when you, let's say a lot of people, what they do is they make the mistake of they want to lose the fat really quick and the weight really quick, and they'll enter a 1,000 calorie deficit where you'll lose the weight and the fat, but you also lose muscle as well. So that's one thing that you have to really be careful of, is everything about fat loss is muscle preservation, everything. So what you want to do is gradually bring down the calories, and you only really want to bring down the calories or up your activity level just to create a bigger deficit when you plateau at something for a couple of weeks, right? The weight's not going up, or the measurements, and we'll go a little bit more in depth into that. But right when you see that your progress is halting, that's when you want to make the necessary steps to create the additional deficits, instead of just going balls to the wall right away, where you're losing the weight and the progress is very stable and you're losing weight every single week, but right when you plateau, you kind of have to go to an extra extreme. So just to like get over that plateau. So those are small things that you have to consider. So take it a little bit slower, right? And it'll help you in the long run, because the final look is the one that will be the one that you desired. All right, so let's move on to tip number 3, which is don't just be dependent on what the weight is doing to measure your progress, but also measure the weight on a weekly, every single day, to get that weekly average in. So what I mean by that is when you are measuring your progress, yes, you want to use weight, but you also want to use your body measurements, meaning how many inches are dropping off, where are they dropping off, and also use progress pictures even on a bi-weekly basis or a monthly basis. And as you gradually lose more and more fat, you can start doing it on a weekly basis as well to really measure the progress well. And going back to the weekly average, so let's say you weigh 173 pounds on 1 week and the next week's average is 172. There's no real need to drop the calories down. But if you're at 173 for consecutive weeks, that's when it's like, okay, progress is a little bit halting, plus the pictures are not getting any better, plus you're not losing any inches. That's when you decide to increase either your steps, increase either your cardio time, or that's when you drop your calories a little bit more. So those are the small little things that you have to consider in order to make the decision that this is where I need to pull the calories or increase the activity, just so you can get over the plateau. But you always want to have something in your arsenal where when the plateau happens, you're prepared. So always use the weekly averages instead of just basing your weight only on one day, where a fluctuation could happen. And it's like instead of 173, it comes up to 176, or it can even go down and be 170, and you're not really sure where the weight is doing because it's fluctuating all the time. So the average weight really cuts through those fluctuations, and you're really able to tell where you're actually progressing or you're not. So step number 4 is that you want to make sure that you're having a sufficient amount of protein. And that goes back to the same basis of muscle preservation. So you want to have anywhere from 0.8 to 1.2 grams per pound of body weight, right? So if you weigh 180, it will be 180 pounds. You can have slightly less and really increase your carbs because they are carb is protein sparing, right? So those are the small little hints that you can do, but everything, it just goes back to muscle preservation. So you want to have a sufficient amount of protein, and it's more so also the fact that it's actually very, very satiating as well. So it actually kills two birds with one stone. So step number 5 is that you want to use low calorie dense foods. So what that helps you provide is a little bit more volume, and it goes back to the protein being a little bit more satiating. It's the same thing with those foods. As the higher volume, the higher volume will actually help you stay satiated for a longer time, and the more satiated you are, the less hungry you are, the less likely you're gonna exceed the daily calorie amount. So basically means that you're gonna cheat a little bit less just because you're not as hungry. Hunger is part of the process. That's something that you have to embrace, but there's steps you can take that you can minimize it slightly, right? But if you're trying to get shredded, you are gonna be hungry, but the low calorie dense foods will really, really help you as well. Okay, so step number 6 is that you only want to lose 1% of body weight per week. So we've been talking about losing the body weight, but you should really have a goal as well. So if you're 200 pounds, that means 2 pounds per body weight. If you're only 150, that means only 1.5 pounds per body weight per week. But if you're 100 pounds, losing body weight probably should be one of the least of your problems, and you should probably be able to trying to gain the weight. So that's ignore the 100-pound one. But if you are 100 pounds and you're trying to lose weight, it should be 1 pound per body weight per week. Right, so it's more so again muscle preservation. Everything is muscle preservation. So if you're losing more than 1%, most likely you are losing a little bit muscle along with the fat. You are gonna lose muscle as you're prepping and going deeper into the cut, but it's all about trying to preserve it as much as possible. So if you're losing more than 1%, you are really cutting into the muscle stores, and that's what the body is using as energy at the end of the day. So that's something that you really, really want to be ahead of. So step number 7 is you want to track and measure everything that you're doing. It can be a hassle, and this is why I recommend staying on that maintenance level and really get used to the tracking, weighing out the food, seeing how much you're moving with a step counter or just doing the cardio, because if you can't measure and track it, you can't be consistent with it, but you also can't figure out what changes to make when you are plateauing. If you're just doing things randomly and just throwing your stuff together, let's say you stop losing the weight, you won't really know where to take out something or put in something just so you can keep progressing. So that's why you always want to track everything, especially the food, right? Everyone says they can eyeball it, but you can't really. You will be off every single time, right? The more you track, the more you measure, the more successful the prep will be or the cut will be. So always track and measure everything that you're doing, because it will help you in the long run. Okay, so step number 8 is, that's not 8. Step number 8 is hire a coach. And it's not coming from the perspective of me being a coach, but it's coming from the perspective of me being a client. I'm actually being coached by someone else right now. Yes, I know my stuff. Yes, I know how to cut, but there comes a stage where one thing is someone's always going to know more than you. But when you do get deeper into a cut, your body and your mind start playing tricks on you where it's not even your fault. It's hormones like ghrelin that really induce the hunger, and they'll make you want to eat. And when you are basing the decision of plateauing, right, you might base it on, it's very, very subjective, right? It's coming from you. So you might allow yourself a little bit more food where you shouldn't really be having it. So having that extra objective eye on you that's keeping track of everything with you will go a long, long way, because it's just another social factor or a social support factor that you can talk to, and it's just that objective eye at the end of the day that's really keeping track of you, that's going to help you in the long run as well. So to recap it all, step number 1 is figuring out, are you even ready for a fat loss phase? Step number 2 is always remain within the 200 to 500 calorie deficit to start off your deficit, and start at 1,000 because you want to preserve muscle. Step number 3 is to measure progress, use weekly average weight, use progress pictures, and also use body measurements to see if you're plateauing or where you need to take out the calories. Step number 4 is that you want to make sure you're having a sufficient amount of protein intake, anywhere from 0.8 grams to 1.2 grams per body weight. Step number 5 is use low calorie dense foods, because it will help with hunger in the long run as well. Step number 6 is that you only want to lose 1% of body weight per week. Step number 7 is track and measure everything, because that's the one thing that's going to help you figure out what changes that you need to make in order to get over the plateaus. And step number 8 is hire a coach. It goes a long, long way. That's when I really changed my physique, as once I hired a coach and it became the accountability factor, someone looking over me. And especially that's someone that you respect, it goes a long way. So I hope that helps. Do all the liking and subscribing stuff if you want, and I'll see you guys next week.